how are you doing? How is everyone doing? We're reading books.
How are all of you? Are you excited to read a book with us?
Yeah,
I hope you did your homework.
This episode is gonna be fucking wild.
This is a pretty wild episode.
These chapters where this book went from somewhat based in reality to like, oh, this is sci-fi. This is
This is something
this
else
book went
entirely
places. Yeah.
So today, we are discussing chapters 49 through 55 of 14 by, who is it, Jake?
Fucking Peter Klein.
Peter Klein's with an S.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I added the end late. I added the S late. Peter Klein's. I remembered it this time, though, somewhat.
You did. Yeah, so last episode, we were discussing the expedition where Nate and Zila and Roger journeyed to not the center of the Earth, but they went pretty far down.
It'd be a fucking boring book if they went to the center of the Earth. They spent 800 days
just
traveling
walking
down, and then they burnt to a crisp and died. Anyway, that's not what happened. They found a room. They found a room deep underground.
We didn't mention it, but they found the elevator. We did mention the elevator, but what we didn't mention was that Zila wanted to take it back up.
I don't blame it.
Roger was like, I'm not too keen on hopping in an elevator that's been down here for a century, unused.
You know what I
That's
would have
like
done?
a mile down.
You know, if I was down there, I think I would have sent the elevator at least up to the sub-basement.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for, like, the peace of mind, test it a couple of times, see if it's still good. Put some weight in it, you know? Like, put some sacks of potato in there, test it. So you can go up and down as much as you need to, and, like, you know. I mean, not if they...
Yeah, just
I'm not
have
sure
it
they're
go
ever going
up,
down again.
have it come back down, see how it did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, they were just like, nope, fuck that elevator. We're not bothering with that. We're going to just take the long way, the safe way.
I don't blame them at all. I bet they were regretting it halfway up, though.
Chapter 49, How the Mystery Gang Closely Scrutinized Apartment 13.
Oh, yeah.
So, at the end of the last chapter, Veek was like, did you see any cool stuff? And Nate was like, extremely cool stuff. And then Nate, like, was telling her about what they found while they walked back up to his apartment.
Yes. And then I got a little bit ahead of myself, and I started talking about this chapter.
Yeah, that's fine. Talk about this chapter a bit.
So basically, Nate is, like, absolutely knackered. He's so tired, so wiped out from the walk. He's just teleporting around the building. So it's like he's talking to Veek, telling Veek what he's found, and then he like loses his trail of thought, and then he blinks, and when he opens his eyes, he's like midway through a conversation with Tim and Tim and Veek, and he's like trying to tell Tim what they found, and then he trails off and he can't remember what he was gonna say again, and then all of a sudden he's like in his room, and Veek's like taking off his shoes and his socks, trying to get him like ready for bed, you know. And he's like trying to think,
telling
of
him
a
how
joke.
smelly he is.
Yeah, and he's trying to think of like a joke about her undressing him or something, and then he falls asleep
for 10 hours,
which is probably not enough sleep given the journey that they've just had. To be fair, yeah.
But he did wake up fairly well rested. As soon as he was done with sleeping, he went to Debbie and Clive's apartment.
Yes, straight away. I don't blame him.
So it was him and them and Tim and Veek that were in there.
Mm-hmm. Was Roger in there?
And
as well?
then also Roger was also there as well, but he didn't talk much in this chapter.
Okay.
He like told Debbie and Clive what was up, and that like, you know, how their apartment was the control room, and Tim wondered what that meant. they started wondering like what was special about apartment 13 other than the obvious, other than like what we've already discussed, because like it's a very ornate, bizarre room. But then Debbie brought up a good question. She was like, well, hold on, what did it say? Did it say control or control room? And Nate was just like, it just said control. Why? And she was like, well, you know, in lab experiments, you always have a control group. And so then they were speculating like, maybe that's why nothing strange happens in apartment 13. Maybe they're the control group while everybody else are the lab rats. And Debbie brought up, I mean, even the control group gets dissected in the end.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of changed. I mean, it didn't change my theory, but it made me, like, you know, the theory I was talking about where I assumed it was a control room. Yeah, this kind of like made me second guess that theory for a second, and then I was like, nah, this, you know, I was like, maybe, and then I was like, what would this be an experiment for, though? Why are the generators? I was like, that doesn't quite make enough sense for me. Yeah, you know, it's like it's got to be a room that does something. I was thinking at this point, it's got to be like, you know, it must be doing something. I'm like, the building is doing something at this point, you know?
Yeah, I do.
It has
so
a
Nate, he asks Clive, like, he asks both Debbie and Clive, like, if there's anything else strange about the room that they haven't, like, already discussed. Clive said nothing was attached to the walls. Like, the counter, the sink, the cabinets, even the outlets, none of them are attached to the walls. They're all free floating. They come from the floor. Like, the only thing that's attached to the walls is what Clive built, the loft.
Yeah. And it's, there's like a gap between the walls and all of the, like, kitchen countertops and stuff.
Yeah,
and they've, like, lost things behind there and stuff like that.
Yeah, like Nate looked behind their kitchen counter, and then Debbie and Clive started bickering about how there's nothing back there other than like the utensils and spatulas that they've dropped back there over the years.
Yeah, and I think this is the point where Nate was like, if you were trying to hide something where people wouldn't find it or wouldn't think to look, especially in a room this tall, you wouldn't hide it at ground level, you'd hide it high up. So this is when they start exploring for oddities in this apartment.
Yeah, Vic and Debbie went up in the loft to look at the walls up there, and Clive said that he didn't see anything up there when he was building the loft. And then he mentioned like how when he was moving the supplies he needed in there to like start building the loft, how like the guy helping him like bumped the like some wood on the wall paneling, and like Clive was terrified about it at the time because he's like, oh my god, we cannot replace these walls. But yeah, so they didn't find anything, and the chapter ended with Vic commenting that they needed a ladder to look at the rest of the walls.
I feel like wasn't this a very quick-fire, short chapter?
This was a very short chapter. It was literally Nate deliriously going upstairs to rest, and then, like, after sleeping, immediately going to apartment 13. And then, like, the chapter ends here, like, with them saying, like, we need a ladder!
Chapter 50. How the Mystery Gang discovered apartment 13's true purpose. Oh yeah, this was really juicy. This chapter, woo! I was like, now you're cooking. Now you're cooking with gas. I like this.
So Roger went to go get his collapsible ladder, and they started like thoroughly examining the walls. Roger looked at 2 of the walls, and Tim looked at the other 2 walls. We learn here that Vic has a thing about heights, as well as her bug thing.
Yeah. Maybe she's not a 2-dimensional character, after all.
We also learned that Zila stayed the night at Roger's apartment because Roger, like, explained she woke up early in the morning and had to make a painting for her class due tomorrow. And then he realized the implications of what he was saying when he said it, and he's like, keep that between us. And Nate was just like, quit bragging.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
So I forgot to mention, like, while Veek, in the last chapter, while Veek was helping take Nate up to his apartment, she brought up Zila and Roger and how Zila went to Roger's apartment. And Nate was just like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. And so here, she brings up Zila and Roger again. And she's like, does it bother you? And he was like, it didn't. Like, he was like, I mean, I guess I'm envious in that guy way, but no, it doesn't bother me. She was like, good, I'm glad. And like, this more than anything else is just like, man, she's so fucking obvious about what she wants.
Yeah. She's playing it like, keep your head in the game, Scooby, you know, like, or Shaggy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep your head in the game.
She's just like, good, we can't have Shaggy distracted in the middle of a mystery.
Yeah. It's too fucking... I don't know. I feel like, because last chapter, when she was like putting him to bed and stuff, I was like, oh, this is cute. You know? It was like actually the awkward hug and everything. I was like, oh, this is pretty cute. To me, the whole like, oh, relationships thing, will they like get together? Won't they get together? Sort of thing. You know, like all of the relationship-y stuff in this book is like the least interesting. I'm like, I would be way more. I wish they would put more like mystery stuff in and kind of like back burner some of the fucking relationship-y stuff, you know? Give me more mystery.
You say that, but also this chapter is amazing.
It is amazing. This chapter is like actually gold. I was so excited doing this chapter.
So Roger found something.
He did.
He found a hole. From the floor, it looked like a knot in the wood. But like when you're actually looking at it through straight on, it's a drilled hole with something called a coffin lock.
Okay. See, for me, I'm like, if it was like, oh, from the ground it looks like a knot in the wood. How? How can you not? How small is it? You know, that one didn't quite make sense to me. That one I'm not too sure about. And also, if there's just a hole in the wall somewhere, like if you're putting up a fucking loft or whatever, you're gonna notice. If he's like actually been up there and been looking around and stuff, like prior, what's his name?
Clive.
If Clive had been up there and looking around and like actually been nosy, he would have seen it. He would have found it. I kind of don't buy that he didn't.
Clive,
you know?
He talked about how he'd looked at the walls, but only in the space where he was building the loft.
I guess. If you like, I guess he I don't know. It depends how small the fucking hole is. Because if he's like at loft height, which is how high I kind of almost assume this ladder is, I guess. Or maybe it's a bit bigger than loft
so
height.
It was described as Roger being well into the space of the third floor. Like, that's how high up he was when he found this thing.
Yeah, so it would have been like the upper part of the next floor up. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I buy it.
Yeah, I kind of buy it, but also if there's a hole in the wall, like the apartments aren't massive, so the chances are you'd be able to see it as a hole and not as a knot in the wood. I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know. That was the explanation they gave. But yeah, so he asked Clive for an Allen and wrench, and he like, underhand tossed it up to him. And
that's quite a fucking throw and a catch.
It was. Right. It was like in the moment when I listened to that, I was just like, "Ooh, cool."
Yeah.
Dudes catching stuff in precarious situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, so he starts like futzing around with the lock in there, and it was stiff at first, but then like he managed to loosen it, and then like he undid the lock, and then some crazy steampunk shit happened.
Yeah, so like the wood panels like align in the walls, and they all pop out sideways like blinds, like shutters, and then they slide into the walls. And this obviously happens with Roger at the top of a ladder using one of those fucking giant boards as support. So this board just pops out, starts flipping and spinning the ladder. So Roger just like screams. Nobody knows why Roger's screamed. It takes everybody kind of like a second. Clive jumps on the bottom of the ladder to try and stabilize it. Roger slides down and crushes him. You know, and then the fucking room is just full of brass tubes, like brass pipes, and giant glass cylinders with like glowing green shit in them, and like it's a whole steampunk control set pops out of the walls, and then there's like a control interface on the far side of the room. Yeah. And I was
and
like,
so the chapter
holy shit.
Ends with Nate saying to Tim, "You were right. You don't control a building. You control a machine."
Yes. This, and I felt quite gratified at this point, because I was like, because I kind of just assumed after a certain point, I was like, the building does something, and I don't know what yet. Yeah. And this was like my whole like labby vibe. Like I was like, oh, it's a sciencey vibe, experimenty thing. Yeah. And after this happened, I was
you were very gratified to know that it was a science experiment. Like you messaged me, you were like, I was right. It's a science experiment.
Yes, absolutely. I was very gratified by this.
Chapter 51: How Roger flipped a switch and how the sun nearly went away. So Veek joked, this chapter, like all of these chapters, or most of them, like pretty much just transition directly into the next. Like, you know, like it's not like a time jump really. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we've got the first chapter where they were like, we need a ladder. And then we've got this second chapter where it's like, oh, we found the room. We found out what's up with the room. And then like this chapter is like them reacting to what they found.
Yeah.
So Veek joked that she didn't expect to find a Victorian supercomputer under the walls.
Yes. But it is a Victorian supercomputer.
It really is.
It literally is. It is like a steampunk.
Written, very steampunk. Written on one of the panels was the name Kotorovich.
Yeah.
And so, like, Roger's looking at this, like, control panel, and it's just covered in rows of, like, levers and push buttons and dials and switches. Roger was like, this is fucked up. The controls are fucked up. Everything's at zero.
Yeah, to which I kind of, like... So I was listening to what he was saying, and I was like, they're at zero. I was like... I instantly... Because I visualized, like, the VU meters, you know, with, like, the dials and stuff. And I've seen ones that are centered. And so I was like, if there's glowing tubes on the walls, I instantly envisioned dials that could move both ways. So I was like, yeah but it's on though. You know, I was very much in like, because Tim says it afterwards. And I was like, yes, Tim. Yeah. I identify with Tim, you know. I'm like, I'm there with you, my guy.
Yeah, Tim pointed out exactly what you were saying. Like, he looked at the dials and he was like, no, zero's in the middle, not at the end. And, like, Roger's like, so? And Tim's like, so everything is in balance. Mm-hmm. Like, it's actively doing whatever it's doing. Yeah. And so then Veek wondered if, like, this was all one machine, like the whole building, or multiple machines.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what if there was something like this in the other rooms? But, like, I guess the logic there is no. I mean, this room is so wildly different from the other rooms. Like,
it is.
Probably this is the only room. And also, like, that cross reference that they found didn't say anything about any of the other rooms being like that.
Truth. The only other room that was weird was 14 marked by danger. The same as 15?
And 16. The wall, so the wall that 16 shares with 14 had that message on it.
Oh. Yeah, that makes sense.
So Veek wondered that. And then Nate, I felt like he summed up the mystery best, right? He at this point, he was like, so 120 years ago, someone built a big machine in the middle of LA and disguised it as a building. why?
Mm-hmm.
And Veek was like, well, keep in mind, this wasn't in the middle of the city when this was built.
And
it was
I
at
was
the edge
right
of the city.
again. I was right again. Because we talked about this last time. I was like, so this whole time I was just rubbing my hands together. Well, I was driving, so I wasn't. But like, I was like, yes, yes, Jake, get it right. I was like, I'm so good at this. I'm so good at reading books.
And then Roger flipped a switch.
This was very not advisable. I would have flipped my shit. So when he flips this switch, he sees the dials start moving. So I think it was 1 or 2 dials, like flick over to like one side. 2 dials don't move, and then another one at the bottom goes in the opposite direction, but it's moving quite slowly, which I thought was like quite nice. It was nicely described. It was very clear in my mind. I was like, I get this. And then an earthquake started, and they were like, oh my god, LA, there's an earthquake. Everybody like sticks to the walls and like jumps to like, try and do whatever earthquake protocol is.
Well, Nate and Veek, there was also like an interesting comment about how Nate and Veek didn't move right away because they had lived here for a while now, and like they weren't sure how bad the earthquake was going to be yet.
Yeah. That's it. And then Nate is like staring out the window. Oh, yeah. The way that they described the earthquake was really fucking cool, actually. The introduction to the earthquake. So there was a truck going past, and they could hear the truck going past and kind of like feel the vibrations of a truck going past. And then,
so they thought it was the truck.
Yeah, and then the sound of the truck didn't go away. And then the vibration of the truck didn't go away, and then the vibration started amplifying. And Nate's looking out the window, and he's seeing across the way that there's like this little girl in like the building across the road, and she's holding like a blue cup in her hand. And this is the part
she's holding ice cream.
Oh, ice cream, was it? Okay. Like a blue ice cream. And then this was the part where I was like, this is not a fucking earthquake. Because the sky, they described like clouds going overhead, and I was like...
The sky, and then Nate realized that it wasn't clouds. The sky was getting dimmer.
I was like relatively shocked, because I was like, is this a weather machine? It's like, I was like, what if this, what if this machine is kind of like just choosing like the state of the weather or the state of like the environment in California, or like the world or whatever.
Like the little girl wasn't reacting to what was happening.
Yes,
and
no, she wasn't.
Then Nate saw something in the sky that scared the shit out of him, and he was like, flip the switch back. And Roger was like, it's just an earthquake, bro. He says as vases and plates are falling and breaking on the floor. Yeah. And Nate's like, it's not a fucking earthquake. Switch the fucking switch back. He's not fucking around.
Yeah. And so Roger flips that switch back.
To Roger's credit, when he flipped that switch, he was careful to keep his finger over that switch so he knew what he flipped.
Yes, yeah, which is a very smart move. So he flips it back, and then slowly the sky goes back to normal. The earthquake stops shaking the building, and then the only thing left kind of like even telling everybody that there was an earthquake is like the chandelier rocking back and forth before the chandelier kind of like just stops. And then everybody's just stood in silence. And then Nate interrupts the silence by being like, we're done. Like, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. Turn this room back into an apartment. Forget that this even exists. We're not doing this anymore. This investigation is over. And then he leaves.
Yeah. Oh, you did skip a little bit. Okay. Veek punched Roger in the arm. Was like, that was fucking stupid.
Veek be punching people all the time.
And Roger was like, how the fuck was I supposed to know it was an earthquake machine?
Very strange. And then that's kind of where the chapter ends.
Well, no, not
No?
quite. So Veek followed him out into the hall, wanting to know what the hell his problem was.
Forgot about that. Well, I should stop trying to assume when the chat. Like, I was just swinging in the dark with that one. I was like, that's got to be right. Just
It's all
miss.
right. It's all right. So so Nate left the apartment, like you said, and Veek followed him, was wondering like, what the hell is your problem? And Nate was like, look, maybe this is just one of those things that men aren't meant to know about.
Yeah.
And Veek was like, why are you so freaked out? And he's like, look, when you saw like when the sky went dim, and she was like, yeah, there was clouds or something. And he's like, no, it wasn't clouds. The sun was dimming. It was going out.
This was when I was like, wow, this book is really dipping out of reality hard. I was like, this is taking a fucking meandering left turn away from the world that we live in. I was like, wow, this is spicy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And then that's where the chapter ends.
That is where the chapter ends. Yeah.
Yes, I got it right. Chapter 52. How Roger brought Nate a translation of what was written in his kitchen.
So it's the next day. And Nate did his job for once.
Yes, he did. I mean, after seeing the sun nearly go out, I think he would be like just wanting something normal, like something mundane. That's kind of what I assumed it was, because he was like genuinely just cracking on with work, like trying to forget all about it. But he does highlight something that he didn't tell Veek. He was like, I lied to Veek, you know? And this is where he says that he saw Cthulhu.
So I wrote down the description, but that's a fairly accurate like assessment.
I was like, what the fuck?
So he saw a creature that looked like a giant whale with big bat wings and tentacles.
Cthulhu.
And it was specifically the tentacles that freaked him out, because like on the underside there was like dozens of these fucking tentacles just like swishing all about every which way. And like every time he thinks about the tentacles, it's like there's a pause and then the narrator's just like, tentacles. Like totally wigged him out.
Yeah, it's so good. And like for me, I was like, oh my god, it's the fucking gates of hell. I was like, I was fucking right again.
Yeah.
I was like, the fucking gates of hell. They found the gates of hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was so
something like
good.
that. Something fucking
I know.
Something fucking nuts.
I know. I was like, what the fuck? So yeah, he's just wigging out in work.
I'm wondering if like the sun was actually going dim, or he just straight up lied and was like, no, what happened was this giant fucking monster was like in front of the sun.
Don't they describe what actually happened?
So as I recall,
there was a description
happened
of that. Yeah. So there was a description of like the sun and the creature and stuff in the sky, and what like how he saw it and what actually happened when he was looking. So it was like the sun turned red and then started fading out, and the sky started turning black. And as the sky and the sun were fading out, this creature was fading in.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was over the top of the sun, but it was like a fading in and out, like a reality blending vibe was the way that it was kind of like described. And I was like, that is weird.
So yeah, he's just cracking on doing his work. Eddie like showed up and made comments about his productivity. Nate ignored him. Good for him.
Good for him.
His coworkers went out for a smoke, and he saw an email from the city about the requests he had made about a month ago, like right around the time he was calling the Department of the Interior.
Yeah.
But he was like hesitant to find out what it said, and then that's when the narration goes into like what he didn't tell Veek.
And
he was just so like while he's thinking about these fucking tentacles, his coworker Zach like touches his shoulder and kind of pulls him out of his reverie.
And he's like super twitchy, isn't he?
Yeah, and Zach's like, all right, sorry, didn't mean to. I just wanted to tell you that I'm quitting. And I thought this was interesting. Because like it was such a like relatable thing.
Yeah, it was just very real. It was like such a like I'm quitting because it's data entry and I did the maths, and if I'd worked at like Jack in the Box the entire time that I've worked here, I would have an extra $2,000 and I'd have healthcare.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh shit, well and he's like, fucking Jack in the Box, man. That's better than this. Which I was like, that is fair enough. And so Nate's like, do you have anything else lined up? And he was like, no.
I don't,
but,
and I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm leaving.
literally. I mean, good on him. Good on him, honestly.
So do you have Jack in the Box?
No.
Oh man, I fucking love Jack in the Box. Oh my God, I have the best story. And like, I know I'm going to go on a tangent and I don't care because this is my favorite Jack in the Box story.
Okay.
So we used to have a Jack in the Box in my town.
Yeah.
It shut down because of COVID.
Mm.
So there was this time, it was like summer of 2020, right? And I knew Jack in the Box was still open. And it was like, this was back when places were open 24 hours. So like before COVID, it was very common in my town for fast food places to be open 24 hours. That went away because of COVID. But this place was still open. And so it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I don't even remember why my wife and I were up this late, but we were like on our way going home and we were both hungry. So we went to Jack in the Box because it was one of the few places that was open. And I pull up into the drive-thru and the guy says to me, "Welcome to Jack in the Box. I cannot take your order."
Oh.
And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "There's nobody else here. I cannot take your order."
Oh, wow.
So it just fucking left. I was like, okay, whatever. And I was super fucking annoyed about it because it's like, why did he not just close up and go home?
Yeah. I
Like-
mean, no, because he's fucking milking them. Milking them for those hours. I would stay
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Literally, he's like, if you're gonna stick me here by myself and pay me to be here, I'm gonna fucking stay for as long as possible and just watch fucking TikToks on my phone.
So, yeah. We
Like,
went
that's-
fucking across the street to a gas station that was still open and got some snacks and went home. And we were both so annoyed about it because like nowhere else was open.
Jeez.
And it was a major shift for us, right? Because like up until that point, we were spoiled. Like places were open 24 hours. Like that was common, and now nobody does that. Nowhere around here does that anymore.
Nothing in the UK, I swear, is open 24 hours. Like nothing. Like I think this McDonald's is the only 24-hour thing I can think of off the top of my head, and I think there's a Tesco. Like a big Tesco will be open 24 hours except for on a Sunday.
I think there's one McDonald's that's open 18 hours.
Oh.
But like it's the bad McDonald's. Nobody like I do not ever recommend anybody go to that McDonald's because there's like 4 or 5 McDonald's in my town. And like that's the one that it's just like I will never go there. I will never go there.
I get you.
But anyway, circling back.
Yeah.
Zach told Nate it's a mind-numbing job with shit pay and no bennies.
I misheard bennies as pennies, and I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, okay.
I was like, I had to play it back, and I was like, oh, I get it.
No benefits.
Yeah, no benefits.
But yeah, so we have that little scene, and then later Nate's in his apartment, and he's like shirtless, and he's just like pacing back and forth, thinking about things, and he's intending to like apologize to Veek and like tell her like what he didn't tell her yesterday.
Yeah, this. I actually really liked how this bit was kind of like following Nate's mentality, and it did that thing where, you know, when people like will jump to an assumption about a situation that they're in, and then it's not the reality, and they get like snapped out of it. So he's like pacing around in his room, being like, "Oh, I gotta talk to Veek, you know." And then it's described as like Veek knocks on the door, but he has no idea whether it's Veek or not. And then he's like, he grabs a t-shirt, he smells it, dirty t-shirt, throws it away, grabs a clean t-shirt, puts it on, walks up to the door, opens it, and then Veek turns into Roger. It was like, I was like, oh, that's really good. I quite like that.
Yeah. He's like so in his head, he's just assuming that it could only be Veek at his door.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, but then we get something really fucking interesting. We get some information that would have been helpful to have known before Roger went flipping switches.
Yeah.
So he says, "Okay, I left work early. Like I called in sick. They let me go home. I have this. The lady that like knows all those languages translated the thing for me. She said it was creepy. She thought that I was writing something.
Yeah, she's like, it's really creepy and authentic.
She thought I wrote this. So I have it quoted here. I'm gonna read out this letter here. To whomever finds these words, 13 years ago, I made a discovery of the most shocking nature. Some men would quake at the nightmarish truth I learned. Others would lose their minds to the horror of it. Indeed, I have since learned, much to my dismay, of those who accept and embrace such horror, as a drowning man will sometimes embrace another and take the poor unfortunate down with him. In the face of such a destiny, perhaps madness is to be expected. Yet I have chosen to resist, and I have been fortunate enough to find those men brave enough and strong enough to resist with me. And I am proud to call them my friends. Humanity shall never lay down and die. Humanity shall conquer every challenge it is given. Kavach is a monument to what we have achieved and to the inextinguishable spark that is man. Do not falter. Do not doubt. Keep the needles at zero. Your friend in triumph, Alexander Kotorovich, 12th of August, 1895.
Oh, yeah. I was listening to that, and I was like, ooh, this is the juicy shit. You know? I was like, this is like, it just, the book seems to have just taken off at this point. Like, every single chapter is just revealing more and more and more. And I was so here for it. I was getting so hyped.
So, Roger told Nate that his coworker said this was old Serbian. So, the reason why it was so confusing is because, like, so once upon a time, Serbian used the Cyrillic alphabet, but now in the modern day, they just use the English alphabet for their language.
Yeah.
And he pointed out the connection of the last sentence on there, like keep the needles at zero, and how everything went crazy when he flipped that switch and the needles weren't at zero. And so he was talking about like how this had been fucking with him all day and he couldn't work. That's why he went home, because he wanted to show this to Nate.
Yeah.
And he was thinking about like how what it was saying lined up with what happened, because he realized whatever the machine is doing, it is preventing what happened. Like like the way we are experiencing life right now is not normal.
Yeah.
Right? When like all of that shaking that was happening, that's what's normal.
Yeah, that's normal. Which I was like, oh fuck, because I didn't even think about that, like at all. And then when they kind of like pointed it out like that, I was like, oh yeah, that's so kind of obvious and also horrifying.
Yeah.
So good though. I was like fully bought in at this point. I was like, this is wondrous. I love it.
Chapter 53. how the residents of Kavach had a third meeting of the minds, and how Debbie told them why Kavach was built. So this is another Saturday meeting, right? Like that's kind of how this chapter starts.
Mm-hmm.
This meeting goes on for multiple chapters, so this is just like the start of the meeting. Clive, it was a little smaller than usual. Clive couldn't be there because of work. And Mandy was straight up like not wanting anything to do with this after the building shook.
Which is totally understandable from like her perspective.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. You go chill out, Mandy.
But Tim got her to promise that she wouldn't tell Oscar what happened.
Good on Tim as well. What a G.
Andrew was at a prayer meeting.
Understandable too.
But so Nate started off the meeting by telling everyone what he had heard back from Public Works, because he had filed those requests with Public Works like a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the man who reached out to Nate in the email said that the files related to Kavach were still active material, and those records were actually sealed, like how federal buildings or embassies, how those records are sealed.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to make a note in the file that Nate had asked about it due to like some bylaw or something in the Patriot Act.
Yeah, which is, I was like, oh no. I'm like, the suits are going to turn up. You know, the men in black are going to be knocking on the door soon.
Yeah. Like, the thing that I took away from this is like, okay, so somebody is still like actively trying to keep this building secret in the government.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have this shit tied up behind the fucking Patriot Act. Like, that's wild.
Yeah, I don't really know what the Patriot Act is.
So it was this thing that was passed like after 9/11 happened. It was like a measure that was taken that granted the government like way more power than they ought to have. So like it's very plausible that this would get tied up behind the Patriot Act. Like, I really dislike the Patriot Act. I understand why they passed it when they did, but like it's one of those things where it has to be re-upped every 4 or 5 years, and every single time it needs to be re-upped. It doesn't matter if we've got a Democrat or Republican president. The president like re-ups the fucking thing, and he doesn't have to like consult anybody either. Like it's all up to the president. Just decide whether or not to sign the fucking thing. It's really, it's not great.
Yeah, that doesn't sound
like
good. Is it like a Big Brother type deal? Like
basically, yeah. Like as I recall, the Patriot Act was the same thing that gave the government the plausibility to like do all the shit that Snowden pulled the whistle on, blew the whistle on.
Yeah,
like it's hidden behind all of that shit, right?
Yeah.
Like it's fucking shady as hell.
That is
Anywho,
spicy. Moving on.
Nate turned over the meeting to Debbie, who like she had like a bunch of shit to say, like to the point that she had like written all of her notes down on index cards. And she was like, it was kind of cute because she was like nervous about talking in front of all of them because she's like not very good at public speaking.
Yeah, and then Tim was like, we're not grading you on this. And then he like looks at everyone in the room and is like, right.
Like he pointedly looked at Mrs. Knight because Mrs. Knight was just like, get on with it.
And then she shifted uncomfortably from Tim's intense glare of like, leave her alone.
Yeah.
It was so good.
So Debbie had spent the past 3 days at the library looking up Alexander Kotorovich, right? And this was, I thought, was interesting because Vic was like, oh, well, I could have helped you with that. How hard is a few Google searches? And Debbie was like, except I wasn't Google searching. I was like doing real research because like not everything is on the internet.
Ouch.
I mean, she didn't say it like that. She said it more nicely, but
still.
Basically, like she was looking through a bunch of encyclopedias, card catalogs, like newspapers that were like scanned onto microfiche back in the day.
Yeah.
And she found out that Kodorovich was like a proto-biochemist and a proto-neurophysiologist. Like he was those things before those terms existed.
Yeah. But he was doing it in like the realm of like looking at psychic abilities and, you know, people's like what is it, like the psychic essence of people and how they all merge and intertwine.
The bioelectric feedback or some shit that comes out of human brains. Like he was like looking into telepathy and all that. And so this is the funky bit, right? Like Debbie was talking about how like this is all pseudoscience today, but like this was stuff that was actually taken very seriously back in the late 19th century. The problem was the direction that he went with all of this stuff that got him labeled as a quack.
Yeah. And I was like, at this point, I was like, what direction did he take with this stuff that would be like, you know, that outlandish? If you're already talking about like...
Sorry, go ahead.
If you're already talking about like telepathy and psychic powers and like mind reading and like that sort of stuff and like cosmic energy, cosmic energy radiating from people's brains and shit, how much more pseudoscience-y can you get before you know
right.
like what absurd shit, you know?
So the way Debbie explains this, Kodorovich, he was researching bioelectricity in the brain. And then he met a guy called William Clifford who was researching like other like higher dimensions beyond the third and fourth. And he saw similarities between his math to do with telepathy and Clifford's math to do with higher dimensions. So like he was like researching it, like the connection, and he was dismissed from the university he worked at because of where he wound up going, right?
This sounds like sounds like the intro for a guest on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it really does. And like, you know, they were all like, well, wait, what got him dismissed as a quack then if like this was supposedly accepted as real science? And like, you know, Debbie's like, he thought the world was going to end. And I loved how Azila reacted. She was like, no way. He claimed there was going to be a psychic critical mass, right? Like he predicted that when enough people were born, the combined brain waves of everyone in the world would sync up and break down certain dimensional barriers.
Kind of like if you put a resonant frequency next to like a tuning fork, it'll just start vibrating just because the other frequency is next to it. It's like that as a chain reaction between all of humanity when it hits a certain point would break down fabric layers of reality, which I was like, oh, that's a good little analogy for describing it, you know?
Yeah.
It
was very weird. And Tim pipes up and he's like, let me guess, it was like around 1.5 billion was the number that he came to.
Yeah.
And Debbie said that in her research, she found the number in newspapers that he said was 1.52 billion. But she's pretty sure the number on Nate's wall is the refined number.
Yeah. Give 5,000, give or take 5,000.
Yeah, like 1.6 something billion. No, it was like 1. I kept rounding up to 1.6. It was like a little. It was nearly 1.6 billion plus or minus 5,000 people. Yeah. So she said that like at this point, all the stories and articles she read, like she found that Kodorovich got this idea that in the higher dimensions there were psychically sensitive alpha predators that once the dimensional barriers collapsed would come through and like eat everything they could until the barriers reasserted themselves. But there's no explanation in there like how he figured that out. Do you know what this reminded me of?
What?
There's this anime called Gurren Lagann. Have you heard of this?
Oh, I've heard of Gurren Lagann, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a one of those mech shows, one of those mech
Yeah.
animes. Like, so the first season is like all about this group of people, like this underground city. Like they all have to live underground, and the main character is tired of living underground and he wants to like go out, and like but like there's like the villains are like actively trying to keep people like in their underground settlements. Like no one is allowed to be on the surface. So the whole first season is like revolution, like, you know, freeing people from their underground settlements. Season 2 turns out there was a very good reason for that, and it's because the moment a city developed enough that it had more than like 1 million or so people in the settlement, then a bigger, badder enemy became aware of their presence, like aliens from another world or some shit.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting.
So, yeah, so like all of the settlements were designed to be small on purpose because they didn't want like 1 million people to gather in one place.
Oh, that's so cool. I might have to go watch that.
Yeah.
I like that premise.
It was very cool. It was very cool. But yeah, so this kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. I mean, it just means that the like psychic predator is the giant. Well, it could be the giant fucking tentacle whales with bat wings. That's fucking such a gnarly description.
Yeah. So the chapter ends with Roger saying, like, this doesn't explain, like, what's up with the building. And Nate responded, it seems pretty straightforward to me. He predicted the end of the world, then he built this place to stop it.
Yeah. Was this when I've forgotten her name. The person giving the talk. Debbie. Was this when Debbie was like talking about the psychic creatures, and she was basically like, this is throughout history there have been psychically sensitive people who have interacted with the creatures, and that's where we get like all of the biblical hell and demons and stuff from. And I was like,
in her research, that was basically because like she was reading articles about like apocalypse cults and shit, and then she mentioned how like supposedly there are people throughout history that have, because they were like they had The Shining or whatever, like they could sense these creatures in the higher dimensions.
Yeah. And it absolutely is the gates to hell then. It just is. Like, that's what the machine does. It is a science experiment that prevents the gates of hell from opening, which means I was just right. I was just nail on the head. Chapter 54. How the building's residents discovered who the architect of Kavach was.
So this leads right in from what Nate said. Like, you know, he built this place to stop it. And Zila is like, so what? This is the anti-apocalypse machine? And everyone discussed the implications of that.
Yeah.
And then Veek asked Debbie, like, to keep sharing, right? Like, she said, this story gets creepier. How does it get creepier? Veek wanted to know. So Debbie was like, well, so Kodorovich moved here and presumably died in LA, but they never found the body. It says in her research that he was last seen on New Year's Eve with some friends, and then a group of people with knives stabbed him and his friends. His friends died, but he ran off and was never seen again.
So then they presumed him dead.
Huh?
And then they presumed him dead a couple of days later.
Yeah. Like, they were talking about, like, hey, wait a minute. People can't just, like... I thought it was, like, it took a lot longer for people to, like, presume someone dead. And Tim was like, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, if this guy got stabbed and ran off and was never seen again, it's pretty reasonable to assume that he's dead after a week.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
So the police believed the attackers were a doomsday cult called the Family of the Red Death.
And this is where I was like, yes, the intro was the past. The very beginning of the book is definitely like it was a past tense thing, and the family is this cult, and it's clearly from the perspective of Kotorovich,
Right.
which is very cool.
So yeah, the police believed the attackers were from this doomsday cult, but they couldn't prove it. And so then like Roger laid it out plain. He's like, okay, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's thinking this, so I'm just gonna say it. Guy predicts the end of the world, builds a machine to stop the end of the world, and gets killed by a group worshipping the end of the world.
Yes.
Mrs. Knight thought this was all ridiculous.
Obviously, Boomer.
I think, actually, she's from the generation before the boomers.
That's fair. That's a whole other kettle of fish, that is.
But yeah, no, Debbie was, then she went into like how there were lots of groups convinced the world would end in the year 1900. And
quite like
this kind of ties,
like the turn of the century, what was it? Like the fucking 2000s. It was like everyone was convinced.
Y2K.
Yeah, everyone was convinced that that the Y2K thing is so fucking stupid.
It really is.
Do you know that it was to do with like the computers and like like the fucking, what was it? It was like nobody programmed any of the like computers to be able to roll over to the following, date
to 2000.
Yeah.
So
they were like,
and so it was like a big concern that it was going to fuck up all the computers, and it's just like, okay guys, we're just going to patch this.
I know. And then fucking Y2K happened the other day.
What do you mean?
There was that security company, like every fucking PC in all of government, all of fucking flight companies, planes were grounded, like all of the things that people were afraid of in Y2K fucking happened the other day because a crowd strike, I think it's called, forced out a patch that had some faulty code in it, blue screened every fucking PC that updated with it. All right, every single Windows PC that updated with this CrowdStrike update, blue screened and went into an endless boot loop.
Wow.
So
hey, did people die? Was that like a world-shattering thing?
I mean, people were fucking losing their minds. Nobody could do their goddamn job for fucking days, but like all of government.
So everyone was fine.
I mean, who knows? I don't want to be the one to say whether people died or not. I haven't looked into it enough to see if anybody was killed by the fucking CrowdStrike update. But
no, I could imagine that probably had a lot of like consequences to infrastructure.
Oh, massive.
Or
Yeah, like prisons and fucking all sorts.
Yeah.
It was like mad. Yeah. Crazy times.
See, I was thinking of a much more innocuous example.
Okay.
You remember Gangnam Style?
Yes.
Do you remember how like the view count went so high because that was like the first ever YouTube video to ever like pop 1 billion views.
Yeah.
The view count got so high that it like because it was like based off of like integers, so it like rolled over to an insanely low negative number, so they had to patch it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was too, when they patched it, they got clever about it, right? So like what they did was they made it so if you clicked on the view count, it would like roll back to the old number.
Yeah.
But literally only on that specific YouTube video.
That's so interesting. I remember there was also around that time, wasn't there like a doomsday for like 2016 or something? It was like one for 2012. There was one for 2016. Yeah, I'm feeling there's another fucking doomsday coming up or something in there. I don't know. It's
Well,
like the
I know that like somebody was like, well, actually, if you read the Aztec calendar like this, the end of the world isn't in 2012, but in some other year coming up very soon. And it's like, come on, fuck off.
Yeah.
But no, like what I was gonna say though was this kind of ties back into that article that Nate was reading before he discovered Tony was actually Kathy.
Yeah. What was that article that he was reading?
I don't know. It was just like kind of general information about like the history of doomsday cults, and it talked a little bit about doomsday cults from like the late 19th century, but like it didn't name the family of the Red Death.
Yeah. I'd be really interested to find out how the family I'd be really interested to find out how the family like came across the idea of like the end of the world, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it took like this crazy, you know, fringe edge of science, like incredibly intellectual academic man, to discover this, then how is some culty personality gonna, you know, unless they're like someone involved in like the psychic, you know?
Well, Kotorovich did share what he discovered, like with the world, right?
Yeah.
Because that message that he left in Nate's kitchen was 1895. 13 years before that would have been 1883.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, sorry, 1882. So he would have, like, for several years after that, he would have been trying to convince people of this. Maybe this cult just kind of latched on to what he was saying and embraced it. Like, maybe he was referring to people like the family.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense.
So when Debbie was going on about how like there were actually lots of groups convinced that the world would end in 1900, Nate was reminded of the message written on his wall. He was like, they have found us. They being this cult.
Yeah.
Zila then alleges that the cult probably found the Kavach building and searched it looking for a machine, but didn't realize the machine was the building.
Yes. Very good camouflage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what led them back to the tree and forest metaphor, and that's when Tim realized that the best way to hide the true nature of the building was to make it into an apartment building to hide it in plain sight. And then Veek realized, oh, that's what the background checks were for. They wanted tenants who specifically weren't going to ask too many questions, which was already kind of something that Nate was thinking of.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, Veek also realizes that in this moment.
Yeah.
So then Debbie pivoted to the building itself. Like, she found out more about, like, the plot of land the building is on. Mm-hmm. It was built in October of 1890. It was bought in October of 1890, and then a few months later, they filed permits to build. About a year after that, the company that was hired to build Kavach was contracted to build a dam to replace one that was going to break down, but the project was never finished, and the money disappeared.
Into the building is what they were thinking.
They were thinking that money was funneled into building, like, the true purpose of Kavach,
Yeah.
The owner of that company was someone called Whipple Phillips.
And they comment on the name, and I want to comment on the name.
Go ahead.
It's a great name.
It's a great name.
It's a great name.
Whipple
Phillips is a fantastic name. I think there needs to be a resurgence of people named Whipple.
I love, too, how, like, whenever they refer to him after that, they started nicknaming him Whippy.
Yeah.
So Whippy died around the same time that dam that his company was supposed to replace. Like, that dam did break, and Whippy died around the same time that dam broke.
Mm-hmm.
The company lived on for a little bit longer. Like, it was renamed and reorganized a few times, but it disappeared by around 1910.
Which is really interesting, because then the question is, and then they touch on this as well, it's like, who is Lock Management then? If it's not that company, who is running Lock Management?
Yeah.
You know?
That, of course, was a dead-end question. Like, they have no information about it, but it is a good thing to wonder. And then that's when Zeke makes this huge connection, right? She pulled up a picture of the cornerstone, and she realized that WNA PTK wasn't monograms, it was initials.
Yeah.
So this is where I realized something that I don't think the book explicitly spelled out. Like, I think you would have to have read the physical book to have understood this. So WNA and PTK are in rows. So W is above P, N is above T, and A is above K. So it's not two men who built the place, it's three. Two of them are Whipple Phillips, the money guy, and Alexander Kotorovich, the idea guy.
And then the last two are NT. And then they start going around the room and they're like making jokes at Nate because they're like, "Aren't you NT, Nate? Are you the one that goes back and warns them?" Yeah.
You went back in time to tell him. That's why Kotorovich didn't have a solid answer, because he couldn't just say that it was time travel. And Tim was like, yeah, right, because time travel in this conspiracy, that's what makes it ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so, they just start throwing out silly names. And then, like, Debbie throws out a silly name and she realizes, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
And that's how the chapter ends. Chapter 55. How the residents of Kavach finally discovered what was hidden behind the door to apartment 14.
And then they go straight into talking about how Nikola Tesla.
So this is how the next chapter starts. It continues right where the last one left off. Mrs. Knight is like, this is preposterous. There's no way it was Nikola Tesla. He was a public figure. He couldn't have just snuck away to work on this building. And Nate's like, I don't know about that. I think he could have. And he was like, didn't, like, Thomas Edison burn down his lab and he had to, like, move to Colorado or something? And so, like, they speculated that maybe what actually happened was the family burned down his lab and he moved to get away from them.
Yes.
And like getting away from Edison was just a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Apparently, so all of the scientists of that time, and this is some wacky shit, but all of the scientists of that time were very, very, I don't want to say all, actually. A lot of them. They used to, like, get together and do seances. Did you know this?
What?
Yeah. There's
like Ouija boards and shit?
No, like a seance. So they would take there's loads of documentation of notes that they've written, and a load of the scientists of this time, like Nikola Tesla and Edison, and like those people. I don't know which scientists exactly. They used to have like seances. And then in their notes afterwards, they would say that all of the scientific ideas, or like some of the biggest ones, came to them through the seances, which is wild shit. Look that up. Like, I want to look that up again. But yeah,
look that up and send me what you find, and I'll include it in the link dump for this episode.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have a little look.
After they're done talking about Nikola Tesla, the meeting ends with them deciding, okay, we've looked at everything. We know everything there is to know, except for apartment 14.
Yes.
So Mrs. Knight goes to chat with Oscar and is like, could you get me white tea and And she like wrote down the specific brand she wanted, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And then he looks at the brand, and he's like, "They sell this at the corner store." And Mrs. Knight, she's a great actress. She's just like, "Oh, I thought you were going to Vaughn's. Don't worry about it." And Oscar's like, "No. Vaughn's, I will go to Vaughn's. They have better prices." And then like he taps his belly, and he's like, "Besides, I could use the walk."
Yeah. Which is this. I mean, I think that Oscar is not really a villain, to be honest.
I agree. Well, because they pivot right back to Nate's point of view here.
Yeah.
Like Nate and Veek and Debbie are watching from the window. Debbie like feels bad for like how they're using him like this, and Nate's like, "I don't think he has any idea what's going on. I think he's just middle management." And then like Veek is like, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, he always seems like he's hiding something." And then like Mrs. Knight kind of puts it best. She's like, "Yes, he hasn't told us our building is an earthquake causing apocalypse prevention machine. That definitely makes him the bad guy."
I know, right? Yeah. She's a real one.
She really is.
So good.
It's so good. But yeah, so Tim, who can pick locks, he's the one that decides to start picking locks here.
Yeah, so I fucking love this chapter.
Yeah.
I think that this was the perfect chapter for us to end on. So, because it's so fucking mundane, right? And it starts so mundane. And they're like, so it's literally just picking locks, and because the door's like painted and all the like edges of the door frame where they're meeting the door and stuff, the door's basically like glued closed. So they're like, Tim's picking through the locks. The older ones take longer if you don't want them to, appear picked into and leave no evidence, So he's like going through and he's lining them up on his belt. And it's like mundane details. He's just keeping the locks in order on his belt so he can put them back on in the right way.
Zila's got her paint kit hidden in Clive's apartment, like ready to repaint the details after they're done in there.
Exactly, and it's like they are cutting around after the door, gets like all the locks are off, and they peel the latches, the like flip latches away from
the hasps
away from the door. Nate tries the handle, and as he twists, the paint around the seal of the handle like rips away.
So much paint that like he can't open it. So like Zila gives him his matte knife. Gives him her matte knife, and is like, "Don't fuck it up. I need it for when I like repaint everything."
Yeah, and like cut away the tears and stuff on the paint.
And it was
that are being
cute,
created.
right? Because like he was doing the work, and everybody else was just like leaning against the walls and gabbing and looking at him, and he's like, "Don't everybody help all at once."
Yeah, literally. And so it's like it's just so mundane, and I love how mundane it is. And they finally get all the paint like cut away. I think Roger ends up helping him or something, doesn't he?
Yeah, Roger's like, "I think I have a matte knife. I'll be right back."
Yeah.
So Roger also mentions that he has like a bigger matte knife in his apartment if they need it, and like Zila makes a joke about how like he's showing off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Want to talk about size, like that sort of vibe. And then so they're like cutting around the edges of the thing, and then they're finally ready to open 14, and they put like a basic plan together. They're like 10 minutes. We go in, we take as many pictures as possible, no matter how weird, no matter how cool, no matter how intense, and how long we want to stay. 10 minutes, and we are fucking out of there, right? And this is where they open the goddamn door. And the opening of this motherfucking door, I was not ready.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fucking wild, isn't it? So it's a portal to space.
It is. It's a portal to space. And the way that they described it, I was like, I didn't know that it was a portal to space at first. I was
No,
like,
because it's all from Nate's point of view.
yeah. So it was like he opens the door, and then he hears like this fucking insane gushing of air, and then he feels himself being pushed into the room, and then it takes him a while to he's like spinning, and it takes him a while to kind of like realize that he's not like the air that he's hearing isn't rushing out, it's air rushing into the room. And then he sees like a giant like star in the sky, and he's like, what
like
the fuck? And then
the walls go on and on and on forever
infinitely,
because
and
there are
like,
no walls.
Literally, and there's like dots of light, everywhere, and stars. And then he turns around, he like turns his head, and he sees that like Zila is like spinning off into space as well.
Zila is holding on to Nate by his waistband.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah, like he's just like the chapter ends with him realizing he was in space.
Which fucking mental. I was like, we talked a little bit about, the whole like dimensional stuff, and they were like, oh, we've seen a little bit of weirdness in the sky. I was like, okay, I can kind of get with it, but then like, oh, and then there's just a portal to space, bolted closed by some fucking padlocks
across the hallway from a control room that is actively preventing the apocalypse.
And I'm like, this, I don't know, the book just... the real question is what's going on with the cockroaches. Like that's... That's what we really need to be investigating now.
That's kind of like the one loose end, like why the cockroaches.
Fuck.
Oh my god.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my god. No, but like it explains a lot though. Like it explains why that message in apartment 16 was written there, right?
Yes.
Like it's like, do not fucking touch this wall.
Yeah.
Like
which
like
is
it is a fucking wall hiding a portal to space.
Yes, and that's why it's so fucking cold.
Yeah. The only thing it doesn't explain is why is it only the wall is cold? Like, why isn't it, like, actively making the rest of the room cold?
I think if you're asking that question after the...
I know. It's a very mundane question. Why isn't the portal to space making everything cold?
Yeah, I think it's because it's somehow a portal to space confined within said four walls that are cold.
Uh-huh.
So,
yeah.
Whatever's keeping it in is also got to be keeping that cold in. Let's just go with that as an explanation.
So the question for you, Jake, is why is apartment 14 a portal to space?
Oh shit. Peter Kleins ran out of ideas of what to put behind door number 14. And he was like, I'm just...
given the name of the book, I bet like that's how this shit all started. He was like, what if there was an apartment building that had space behind one of the doors?
Yeah. I mean, when we started this book, this was so far away from the direction that I thought it was going in.
Yeah.
It's like I thought it's like thinking you're getting on a flight to Spain and then you land in Moscow. You're like, what the fuck has happened here?
Where am I?
Yeah.
And so this is why I have such a hard time describing this book to people, right? Because like where you start is not where you end at all.
No.
And like that's part of the joy of the mystery, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just go telling people, oh yeah, this is like an eldritch horror thriller, right? Because if you do, then like from the very beginning, people are like, okay, where does it get eldritch though?
Yeah. Yeah, literally.
Right?
Yeah, you can't. I'm so happy I went in blind.
Yeah.
I'm so happy I went in blind.
Yeah. Like you
Yeah,
have
'cause
to with this book.
I like refused to read any when I was like looking through, getting the audiobook and stuff, and like I was searching for like downloadables and stuff. I refused to read any of the content like that was like, oh, this book is about this, that, and the other. I was just glazing over anything that talked about what was in the book. I shielded myself.
I'm glad.
Yeah, and me too.
There is
so
one
glad.
thing that we skipped over. It's not in my notes, but I know it came up in one of these chapters where they were having their meeting of their minds again.
Okay.
Someone asked Veek about the word Kavach and like what it means.
Oh,
and
yes.
she said depending on context, it means armor or shield.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at me doing my research and being right.
Yeah. Look at you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been right about a lot of things over the last 2 episodes. Why is there a room? Let me shoot in the dark about why there's a room to space.
Space.
Ooh. Maybe it's like a cage.
Okay, I'm listening.
So maybe it's like so there's a couple of things. Maybe it's like, oh, when things come through, if anything comes through, there's like a way to harness that like portal to space to like try and separate the things that come through to there. Or it's an escape route. If those needles are not at 0, all else fails, we just hop through this fucking door and we wind up in a bit of space. Land on the nearest planet and, start over.
Fucking wild.
Harnessing power from the stars there. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I genuinely, I don't know why the fuck.
So yeah, that's it for this episode.
Whoop, whoop.
Will Nate survive? He's got a death grip on that doorknob.
Yeah. And he's being held, yeah. Is he being pulled back in by, Zila? Or is Zila
fell
holding
through
on
and holding on to his life,
yeah,
lest she
yeah.
get thrown into the abyss.
Yeah, literally. That's what I thought. That is what I thought was happening. Jesus Christ. Well, I am literally the second we finish recording here. I gotta drive somewhere, and it's like a 35-minute drive. So guess what I'm listening to?
This immediately. Yeah.
Literally.
I was very surprised that like this is how the chapter ended. Like, because it's been so long for me, right? Like, when they were like, okay, it's time, we're gonna go see what's behind apartment 14, I was like, oh shit, is that happening now? I thought that was later.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. Well, I mean, like, not for me, but because I literally had no idea. But like, I was very when they said, "Oh, let's go check out apartment 14," that's the only thing left. I was like, "Oh, I forgot." I was like, "It's the name of the fucking book," and I forgot it was a thing. I was like, every single time I load up this book, I look at that fucking door.
Yeah.
And just click on it, start listening, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, they're finally going to do it.
So the next chapter is the start of the next arc, which is called Eves. Yeah.
You want to know a question I have, right? And I feel
Yeah.
like this is just a like plot armory, like for the sake of the story rather than for the sake of for the sake of the story rather than for what makes sense.
What's up?
They definitely would have opened number 14 sooner.
You think so?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, the amount of times they go into like Clive's place, they've been in there like 3 or 4 times. Every single time they come out, they're faced with that door.
Yeah, I mean,
they're looking at it every single time.
That's a point because, like, before they went down into the cellar, right? Like, they had that thing where they were like, okay, we've got 90 minutes. Like, let's check out the cellar. And they checked out that one room that was like turned out to be nothing.
Exactly.
It's like they could have on the way down checked out 14. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like they only didn't, and it only didn't cross their mind because it's this big reveal,
Right. And
it's
like having that reveal before they go down into the cellar. Like, you want this to be the last thing, because if this is not the last thing, they're gonna stop investigating after they discover this thing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. They're all pretty fucking unhinged.
I mean, like, I'm just thinking, like, if I discover the space portal before I discover the tunnel into the Earth, I think I would be too terrified to go down into the tunnel.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. You'd be like, every single room that you haven't been into could be a portal to space at that point. I'd be so afraid.
Okay. Anyways.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. I truly hope that you all have been reading along with us.
Yes.
Once again, the way these episodes have been broken up was not planned, but it's been working out really well.
It's perfect. It's like Peter Clines was sat there going, I know how many chapters these stupid goons on this podcast will fucking... Anyway,
seven an episode.
7 an episode. That's how they'll break it up. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will see you all in 2 weeks, where we will be discussing chapters 56 through, I want to say 62, 56, 57, 58, 59, 70, 72. Yeah.
Cool. How
62.
many chapters are
62,
left?
not 72.
Is it like a perfect division into 7, or are we just gonna have like a randomly short episode?
I don't know, because I don't want to skip to the end to find out
fair.
what the final chapter is. I know that it's like somewhere in the low 80s.
Okay.
So
Well,
whatever the last
hopefully-
episode will be, it'll probably be a little short.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll be a little long.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't
That's
think
fair.
it's going to perfectly line up to like be like 7
what if
chapters,
it
the final
does?
episode.
But what if it does?
That would be cool.
That would be
That would be cool.
That would be magical. Well, probably won't.
Bye.
Bye.